Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Bass Trending Gist, where we break down the stories that truly affects you. Today, we are tackling a massive economic story brewing in Nigeria. On one hand, the Senate has just given a green light to President Tinubu's administration to borrow a staggering $21.8 billion. dollars. On the other hand, the Central Bank of Nigeria is holding interest rate firm, making it incredibly tough for businesses and individuals to strive. Are these two policies working together, or are they pulling the country in opposite directions? Is this a bold plan for infrastructure and development, or are we sinking deeper into a debt trap? We have clips featuring two of Nigeria's sharpest analysts, Rufai Oseni and Dr. Ruben Abati, who dissected this issue on Arise News. We will watch their take, and then I will give you my breakdown of what this all means for our future. First of all, let us hear from Rufai Oseni. He connects the dots between the CBN's high interest rate policy, the reality of inflation that Nigerians are feeling every day, and the government's seemingly endless appetite for loans. He questions the logic and the priorities. Pay close attention to his points about the promises made when the fuel subsidy was removed. So sit back and take a watch.
So, Rufai, this would make it the seventh time that the MPC has chosen to hold on those rates. Still a lot of pressure from various avenues, but this is how they are justifying their position.
Pretty much the inflationary pressures are not out yet. That's what they're telling you with this rates. Because when you look at the month-on-month number, the parameters are still the same. Food inflation is still going up month-on-month. You can have the headline inflation reduced, but the month-on-month number, when you dig in, inflationary pressures are not out yet. So considerably they're holding. But you know what the hold is doing to business? It's strangulating businesses. Because at 27.5 from CBN rates, when you go to the bank, it's well over 30%. How can a business thrive in that environment? And these businesses are competing with some other foreign multinationals that are getting loans at a cheaper rate. But on the flip side of it, we have a very, healthy foreign reserves. But the question is, we've got foreign reserves. At the same time, we're still incurring a lot of loans. So the economic dilemma is something. And we had not sorted out the project we had on ground, but we started incurring more. Take, for instance, this Eastern Corridor project they talked about. It was a project under President Buhari. In fact, it was launched in 2021. And what happened to the project? Only one phase was completed. And now the threshold then was about 3 billion. Today we are still collecting about 3 billion. Time value of money has been a problem on that project. And the hitherto loans that we collected and the funding patterns we use for that project, we are shifting those funding patterns, trying to get other loans for that project. That project has not been completed. Correct me if I'm wrong. How do we manage projects in this country? Look at the coastal road. We have always talked about the funding. It was said to be about close to 15 trillion. They said they launched the first phase of it about 30 kilometers. Anyway, there have been disputes back and forth about even the threshold of the 30 kilometers that was launched. Some said they've done more, some said they've done less. But now we have to go look for money, over $700 million for this, at a time where people are suffering in this country. Yes, a lot of people are going to make the argument, Rufai, we need infrastructure to be able to grow. You need to open up that corridor. Yes, but also we also need priorities. So we keep increasing the loan threshold. Cumulatively, where most of this money goes in, the loan will be going to about over 100, close to 140 trillion threshold. With other expenditure and loans to be collected to in this timeline, definitely might go more than the 135, 140 trillion threshold. At the same time, where the argument that was made for removal of subsidy was, we will take less loans and we'll be able to plow the money into development. So where are the gains for that subsidy? And these are the questions, and that's why you have a lot of economic imbalance. And that's why you have a lack of productivity, despite even the rebasing of the economy. It shows to a large extent we do not have a lot of productivity because we are still the fourth economy on the African continent. About 243 billion for about 199 billion for a population of over 200 million. This was the same economy that as of 2014 had a threshold of over 500 billion. So what do we do? I'll put forth a couple of suggestions as regards how we can do projects. The need for partnerships. But how will those partnerships work? We've seen some of them work in this tax credit scheme. To revitalize the rail line, no need for partnerships. Probably looking at also decentralizing the National Railway Corporation so that we do not have to have people that will buy government cabins and coaches for the trains alone. Maybe you can have some private people also coming. We've seen it work with some projects. We've seen it work with the likes of Dangote and the likes. There are tax rebates, yes, and they get the project done. Probably some people will argue with a better threshold of accountability rather than loading up our loan books I will have to pay interest on. Because when we make the argument, this government has collected a lot of loans, people will say, no, we need the money for development. But that was the same cesspit we went through under President Buhari. And the question is, what's the viability of this project? A need for return on investment. How viable has the Lagos-Ibadan rail line been? What has it brought back to our coffers? And you see all of this conversation on how viable corruption with projects and things like that also span to the P&ID projects. If you read Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala's book, she talked about extensively how people use judgment debts. They will deliberately ensure that they sign contracts with government, things are not executed, they'll take the government to go exactly the replica of what happened in P&ID. When the P&ID revelation came out, we saw a lot of people working in government acting against government. And that's why the judge says he can't just understand how that happened. And sometimes the things that happen in Nigeria is so abysmal. So all of these are intertwined. And we still have many cases of judgment debts we are still trying to sort out here and there. And some that we are still fighting in some climes. So we need to have a renewed approach to be able to fund our project, and we need to prioritize. Is this the time for those heavy liftings like the coastal road, impacting our loan profile? Should we really be doing this at this point in time? There are basics that people need are not being met. Yeah, we're building large roads, but over 80% of the hospitals, primary healthcare centers are not in great shape in this country. And we are building roads, but primary healthcare center is not in great shape. Educational system not in great shape. Isn't it time for us to introspect? Let's have a conversation this morning.
Okay. Powerful points from Rufai, especially on the project management and the contradiction of borrowing more after the subsidy removal. Now, let's shift to Dr. Reuben Abati. He tackles this from a different but equally important angle. The political machinery. He questioned the role of the Senate as a check on the executive arm of government and asked the fundamental question that every Nigerian should be asking: what will this money actually be used for? Sit back and take a watch.
What are the issues? Let's start with the Senate approving 21.5 billion on the global loan request by the Tinubu administration. Well, the first question to ask is, will anybody be surprised? This is a, National Assembly, a Senate that is committed to defending the interests of the executive. Ironically, symbolically, historically, we have, at this time, a Senate that says we are one-on-one with the executive of the federal government of Nigeria. Why, they deny it, some of them deny it consistently, but the truth is that from what we have seen, anything that the executive takes to the Senate passes, which, is contrary to Baron de Montesquieu's policy principle about the separation of powers. So nobody is surprised that this is the case. Now, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, when he presented that proposal to the Senate, said that this would be about infrastructure, about education, about the health sector, provide relief to Nigerians. So they wanted more money from the EU, they wanted more money from the Japanese, they wanted more money from anywhere else to fund issues in infrastructure, education, health, infrastructure, and all of that. The question we ask, every Senate defines its own character. So this has been passed. But Nigerians will ask the question, what is going to happen hereafter. There's nothing wrong. The professionals tell us, the professionals tell us, the economists, that there's nothing wrong in borrowing. It is what you do with it that matters. So what are they going to do with this approval of $21.5 billion? The ordinary Nigerian people will expect that this would translate to developments and advancements and opportunities in terms of provisions within the social sector. Would this be the case? This is a question to be asked. So this comprehensive borrowing for the 2025-26 fiscal year, these are the questions that Nigerians would ask. When it happens, we will say that it has happened. Now, in the case of the PINID, now this was a subject that we delved into on this table for a very long time. Now, what was the issue? The big issue here is not about Sir Robert Knowles, judge of the Commercial Court in England, saying, well, he didn't know what happened. No, what he was alluding to, that he did not expressly point out, is the fact about the behavior of Nigerian authorities. In the course of that case, we saw how officials of the federal government mismanaged their positions. We saw how there were controversies over the place of arbitration. We saw how the Nigerian government itself was wrong-footing itself in terms of how, which judgment was appropriate and all of that, in a matter that could have been very clear. Sir Robert Knowles, in giving the final judgment, tried, of course, to resolve the issues by issuing the judgment in the favor of Nigeria. The lesson from it is that the Nigerian authorities, either Ministry of Finance or other agencies involved, should know that in other transactions, should know how to go about it. They gave the PINID contract to an agency that was not even fully privileged or knowledgeable about the business. There were allegations of corruption. So it didn't follow the normal pattern. So that's why Sir Robert Knowles can come around at an event on Monday in London at the Treasury Institute of Arbitrators in London and say that he didn't know what happened because Nigeria always presents the world with what didn't happen elsewhere. That's the lesson there. And the lesson there is to prevent that kind of arbitrary behavior that seems to be standard practice in Nigeria. The third issue that you brought up was the CBN, right? Retaining all the parameters. Well, the CBN, according to Olayemi Cardoso, the CBN governor, says, they're trying to be cautious, optimistically, to manage the disinflationary trend that they have observed, and to ensure how, the indicators, the positive indicators that they have seen can be further sustained. That is the position. That's what the CBN governor said. And the 12 members of the Monetary Policy Committee all voted in favor of that decision. But the question to ask is that, where does this leave us? The CBN is talking about disinflationary trend. He's talking about foreign exchange volatility. He's talking about cautious optimism. But the Nigerian people, ahead of that, I think is the 101st or whatever meeting of the Monetary Policy Committee meeting. Now, the average Nigerian, in a poll conducted by some of these pollsters, said that Nigerians are expecting, investors are expecting a reduction in interest rates. But what the CBN has tried to do is to hold the rates, whether it's CRR for commercial deposit money banks or for merchant banks. Deposit money banks are 50%, merchant banks are 16%, CRR within that range, the basic rate at 27.5%. All of that, fine. But the average Nigerian is worried about the cost of borrowing. And I think that the long-term objective should be how we get a correspondence between the policies that they come up with and how that works out on the streets, in the marketplace. The average Nigerian is still suffering under the burden of high interest rates. In a poll conducted by one party, the projection was that if you reduce interest rates, then Nigerians will have to, the cost of borrowing will reduce, the average man will also benefit from that. But I get the point about Cardoso and his team saying that, okay, this is cautious optimism time because of disinflationary rates, and they want to see the correspondence between inflation and economic growth.
All right, let us unpack this. What we've just seen are two sides of the same troubling coin. Rufai Oseni laid out the economic contradictions with surgical precision, while Dr. Reuben Abati exposed the political weakness that allows these contradictions to exist. So here is my take. The core issue here is a profound trust deficit fueled by a clear pattern of fiscal indiscipline. Let's start with Rufai's points on the fuel subsidy. The social contract offered to Nigerians in May was simple: endure the immediate pain of high fuel price, and in return, the government will have more revenue, stop its reckless borrowing, and invest in the country. This $21.8 billion loan request feels like a direct violation of that contract. It begs the question, where are the subsidy savings? And why is the first major move to take on even more debt? It makes the initial sacrifice feel less like a strategic plan and more likely a pretext. Secondly, the issue of project management is not just a footnote. It's the entire story. Rufai's example of the Eastern Corridor Rail project is perfect. We are borrowing more money for a project that was already supposed to be funded by previous loans. This is the Nigerian story in a nutshell. We initiate projects, take loans for them, they get abandoned, and a new administration comes in to take fresh loans for the very same projects. It's a rinse and repeat cycle of debt without tangible completed results. How can we be confident that the new coastal highway won't suffer the same fate? This brings me to Dr. Abati's brilliant point about the role of the legislature. The Senate is meant to be the people's safeguard. They are supposed to scrutinize these loans requests, ask for detailed breakdowns, demand accountability for previous loans, and act as a brake on the executive. But as Dr. Abati noted, what we often see is a rubber stamp assembly. The speed with which such a monumental loan request is approved, with little public debate or rigorous questioning, is alarming. It signals that the system of check and balances, which is the bedrock of democracy, is critically weak. So, what does this mean for the average Nigerian on the street? It is simple. This isn't abstract economics. This debt is yours. It's your children's debt. Every $1 billion we borrow today means more of our future revenue will be spent on paying interest, not on fixing your local primary health centers, equipping schools with modern tools, or ensuring you have stable electricity. While the government says this loan is for infrastructure, health, and education, our history shows that a large chunk of such funds often get lost to inefficiency, mismanagement, and corruption. The P&ID case that Rufai mentioned is a scary reminder of how poorly managed contracts and projects can almost bankrupt the nation. In conclusion, the problem isn't borrowing itself. The problem is borrowing without a track record of accountability. It's building a new mansion on credit when the foundation of the old one has collapsed from neglect. Until the Nigerian government can prove it can manage the resources it already has, every new loan, no matter how well-intentioned it sounds, will be met with justified skepticism by the people who will ultimately bear the burden. That's the hard reality of where we stand. What are your thoughts? Is this loan a necessary evil for development or a catastrophic mistake? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this breakdown insightful, please hit the like button, subscribe to Obas Trending Gist, and ring that notification bell so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching and stay informed.